So, Dean Dairokuno, thank you very much for spending this time
It's
with
my
us.
pleasure.
So, I guess we'll start off with a tough question.
All right, tough question.
So, what are, in your opinion, some of the biggest challenges facing the nation of Japan today, and how are these issues sort of being addressed?
Well, if you look back in the history of Japan, that after 1945, when we were defeated by the Allied forces, but ever since, our economy has been growing very well until 1970s. Right. But around the 1970s, we noticed that, what Japanese economy actually was experiencing a kind of a structural change, which had been brought by the more, the large-scale change in the international environments.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is called, globalization of the world. So, this globalization happened very early in the United States, because the United States played a major role in protecting liberal countries. They invested a huge amount of money in protecting those countries against communist country, of course, at that time. But since for that purpose, actually, in terms of economy, they set their dollars very high against the other currencies. That really make the countries like Japan to recover from a war devastated economy. But that was pretty good. That encouraged many industries in Japan. However, that meant for the United States is that the major industry had been losing the competitiveness against all those countries they were supporting, right? That's the first phase of the globalization. So major companies like Ford and GM were actually shifted their production center to many different parts of the world, right? So that means actually there is a less job in the United States for the people in the United States, right? But the second phase of the globalization, already happened. Well, in the developed country like the United States, all those Western European countries, and including Japan, most of the domestic market have been saturated. Nobody wants to buy anymore. Right. Well, look at the cars running here, right? We don't want to own 2 or 3, 4 cars, even though you were become rich, right? So only the demand for the car is just you were just driving a car for 10 years, so we decided to buy a new one. But when you don't have a car, like 1960s, 70s in Japan, not many people didn't have a car, so that there was a huge demand. That's really giving economic stimulus to the society, right? But once the market is saturated, nobody wants to buy anything. So the economies slow down. Then all those liberal countries, they have to find market somewhere else, right, outside of the country. So capital moves around the globe, and then every country wanted other country to get rid of all the regulations, right? Well, getting rid of the regulation, what does it mean to you? The question.
I guess maybe the regulations, like environmental regulations, is kind of the first thing that pops into my mind. So maybe like, for example, when you're talking about car manufacturing, making it easier for them to use certain chemicals or materials or something like that.
Right. So when you talk about liberalism, liberty of the people, well, you don't need regulations. Well, that's a very American idea, isn't it? Right? Well, you are on your own. Then you want to keep your liberty as much as possible. Well, that's not a bad idea. But when it comes to the economic activities, just he pointed out at the moment, well, if you get rid of the regulations too much, then companies can do anything to make a profits. Well, if it happens with pharmaceutical companies, no regulations. I don't want to live in a country which produces the medicine without any regulations. We have to worry about the quality of the medicine, right? But not only that, right? The deregulation on the finance, that really changed the world a lot. While you were actually paying money on the net with a credit card or any other means, well, you were paying to people in India or Pakistan or maybe Afghanistan. No, never happened. But you can do that. You can move the money from the United States to anywhere, right? So, and you know that money is a lonely existence. You know that? Well, do you understand what I mean?
Kind of.
No,
what do you mean?
They are lonely, so that they want to find friends. So money goes where money exists. So if your economy is not doing well, then money does not stay.
Right.
Money goes out of the country. It doesn't matter whether the money holder is GM or the Ford or any other company with an American name.
Right.
Well, even though company has got the American name, they don't care about the American people. They care about the profit.
Right.
Well, if you look at the competition, global competition among the same industries, companies in the same industries, then if you are president of those companies, what would you do? You want to stay in a country where you cannot make any profits? Well, you just move around, to find a place you can make a profit, right? Isn't that right? Well, it's a very rational way, but rational activity for any manager of the companies. But it has a very it brings the merit to the people living in the country. Why? Well, of course, mobility, horizontal mobility of the Americans are very high compared with those of the other countries. Well, people move around, not only in the country but also across the world, right? But still, most of the people stay in the United States to finish their lives, right? If the money moves, but you don't move, well, as money moves, job moves. So that's the problem. Now Japan is now facing a very serious problem. Have you heard of the flood which happened in November in Thailand? No. Okay. Well, last year, 2011, Japan experienced really severe natural disaster, as you may know. The huge earthquakes, 9.2 Richter scale. Wow. Oh, well, I really didn't like it, right? But and after that, actually, Japanese companies, mostly the automobile companies, have factories in Thailand. Well, Toyota, Nissan, all those Suzuki and Subaru, all those companies have factory over there. But the most of the factory was flooded because mismanagement of I shouldn't say that, mismanagement by the Thai government. How to control the flow of the river. They usually have little small scale of flood, but last time because of the conflict between the liberal and the conservative, well, the government faced with the difficulty to make the decision very efficiently, so that that caused flood. And then the supply of the parts or engines, all those things are stopped because of the flood.
Right.
And then we had a problem in the country caused by the earthquake. So in the case of Toyota, their production, the car has decreased, decreased by 30%. Wow. Huge. Well, that means really, really serious problem in terms of employment back in the country. But still, people are worried about the danger. Well, I mean the crisis. The management in the Thailand.
Right.
So usually people do not want to shift factory anymore to the Thailand once they experience it. But just about 2 weeks ago, I made a trip to Bangkok, Thailand, and I went to a Chamber of Commerce of Japan, and I checked whether data about how many countries are coming in, how many companies are coming in, then how many companies are going out.
Right.
But I just saw the increase, simple increase of the number of companies coming in the Thailand. Although they had we had a serious problem with the flood. Well, that means we cannot sell anything anymore in the domestic market.
Right.
So they are shifting the not only the production center but the headquarters for sales overseas, because ASEAN countries are growing in the market. So rather than setting up the factories in Japan,
Right.
which is very costly in terms of labor cost, which is very high in labor cost.
Right.
Just move to the country where the labor cost is 1/5, right? Then look at the area surrounding the ASEAN country, China, India, right?
Right.
That's gonna be a huge market. So all the money, all the resources are moving out of Japan to all those emerging market area.
Right.
Right. So we are losing job. The the wages has been declining, and then you may have heard the word, Japanese word, shushinkoyo. That's lifelong employment. That was considered to be one of the feature of the Japanese society, which
Right.
is very stable, but they no longer stable. Well, within that one framework, almost 60 to 70% have a permanent. Well, it's a kind of permanent, lifelong job.
Right.
But currently, in the last 20 years, actually those stable job has been declining. Instead, the part-time job, the temp job has been increasing instead, without any fringe benefits and the security. Just more like the United States, right?
Right.
So, Japanese society has become insecure and unstable, and with less opportunity for working, especially for youngsters, who are just graduated from the university.
Right.
Well, but the mindset, actually attitudes, cannot change overnight, right? Reality goes, faster than our consciousness. So that, I guess that the biggest problem for the current, university student is that, they cannot really grasp the reality and the magnitude of the influence of the change. So it is very important, crucial for the college students to understand, what's happening in the different kind of world. Actually, those are problems that are interlinked.
Right.
So that's another problem. Well, one country cannot solve that problem
Right.
either.